What is up, history lovers? Today we're diving into a historical event that will absolutely shatter everything you think you know about international conflicts. You think modern diplomatic crises are insane. Wait until I tell you what almost started a war between America and Britain in 1859. One dead pig, I am not kidding. A regular black pig nearly triggered a full-scale war between two superpowers. Before we dive into this international crisis that would make modern diplomats laugh out loud, smash that subscribe button because what you are about to hear will make you rethink what making a mountain out of a molehill really means. Picture this. It is 1859 on the San Juan Islands, located between what is now Washington State and British Columbia, Canada. Imagine you have two neighbors who both claim your backyard belongs to them, and both of them are armed and have serious anger management issues. That is basically the situation between America and Britain on these islands. The root of the problem was the 1846 Oregon Treaty, which had border descriptions more vague than your dating app bio. The treaty said the boundary should follow the main channel. But here is the plot twist. Which channel was the main one? This was like GPS giving you two different routes and saying, pick whichever one you feel like. Americans thought the border should run along Harrow Strait, making the San Juan Islands American territory. The British insisted it should follow Rosario Strait, making the islands British. The two countries were basically like two kids fighting over the same toy. Except the toy was an entire archipelago and both kids had armies. Making things worse, both governments encouraged their citizens to settle in the disputed area, which was like throwing matches into a powder keg. American farmers and British Hudson's Bay Company employees were living on the same island, looking at each other like unwanted roommates every single day. By 1859, San Juan Island had about 25 American settlers and one British Hudson's Bay Company farm. This farm kept tons of pigs, sheep, and other livestock while the American settlers were trying to grow crops. The relationship between these two groups was basically a ticking time bomb waiting for a spark. The pig that changed history, Lyman Cutler versus Charles Griffin, the 15th of June, 1859, started as a normal morning that was about to become the most ridiculous day in international relations history. American settler Lyman Cutler walked outside to find a large black pig having an all-you-can-eat buffet in his potato patch, treating his carefully planted potatoes like a personal snack bar. This pig belonged to Charles Griffin, an employee of the Hudson's Bay Company. By today's standards, this was just a regular neighbor dispute, your neighbor's pet trashing your yard. But on San Juan Island in 1859, this became the spark for an international incident. Cutler had complained multiple times before about this pig's invasion behavior, but Griffin clearly didn't take this American farmer's protest seriously. This was like your neighbor constantly letting their dog poop in your yard while completely ignoring your complaints. Anyone would lose their mind. When Cutler saw this pig wreaking havoc in his potato patch, yet again, he completely snapped. He grabbed his shotgun and shot the innocent pig dead. This single gunshot didn't just end a pig's life, it nearly started a war between two nations. This was definitely the most destructive single shot in history. When Griffin discovered his dead pig, he furiously demanded Cutler pay $100 in compensation. In 1859, $100 was equivalent to over $3,000 today. A fortune for a regular farmer. Cutler refused to pay that much and only offered $10. This price difference was like haggling on eBay, except the consequences could be war, escalation nation. From neighbor dispute to international crisis, Griffin wasn't satisfied with Cutler's compensation offer and decided to report this pig murderer to British authorities. He contacted the British magistrate in Victoria, claiming Cutler not only killed his pig, but refused to pay reasonable compensation. This was like escalating a neighbor dispute to the HOA, except the HOA was the British Empire. British magistrate William Delacourt decided to personally handle this case. He sailed to San Juan Island, planning to arrest Cutler and bring him to Victoria to face British justice. This was as absurd as foreign police showing up at your door to arrest you. When Delacourt tried to arrest Cutler, the other American settlers went absolutely ballistic. They refused to let British officials enforce law on what they considered American territory. This situation was like your neighbor suddenly claiming your living room belonged to him and trying to enforce his house rules there. The American settlers immediately called for help from US military forces in Washington Territory, claiming the British were trying to illegally arrest an American citizen. When this news reached Captain George Pickett at the US military post in Bellingham, he decided to take action to protect American citizens. Captain Pickett, yes, the same guy who would later lead the famous Pickett's Charge at Gettysburg, landed on San Juan Island with 64 soldiers and 1 cannon. He declared the entire island under US military protection and announced that any attempt to arrest American citizens would be considered a hostile act. This decision was like throwing a grenade into a powder keg. A neighbor dispute over a dead pig had suddenly escalated into a military standoff between two nuclear weapon level empires. Military madness. When two superpowers drew swords over a pig, the British reaction to the sudden US military occupation of San Juan Island can only be described as shock and fury. British Admiral Robert Baines immediately dispatched 3 warships to San Juan Island, carrying over 2,000 British Marines and 70 cannons. Picture this scene: 64 American soldiers with 1 cannon facing off against 2,000 plus British Marines with 70 cannons. This was like bringing a water gun to a tank fight, except both sides thought they were in the right. The pressure on Captain Pickett was unimaginable, but he refused to back down. The British commander demanded immediate US withdrawal, or they would use force. Pickett's response was one of the most hardcore diplomatic statements in history. "We came here to protect American citizens, and will stay here until hell freezes over." This line was more badass than any modern action movie. Quote, "The two armies faced off on the beach. Cannons aimed at cannons, soldiers aimed at soldiers. Any nervous soldier pulling a trigger could have sparked a full-scale war." This tension was more dangerous than the Cuban Missile Crisis because the on-scene commanders were hot-blooded military men, not experienced politicians. Even more absurd, both sides' soldiers knew this standoff was over a pig. Imagine the soldier's mindset: "I might die here over a pig." This was definitely the most ridiculous battle motivation in military history. Government officials in Washington and London had a collective WTF moment when they heard this news. Two world superpowers were at each other's throats over a $10 pig. This level of absurdity was beyond what even the craziest screenwriter could imagine. Just when war seemed inevitable, British Admiral Robert Baines made a decision that saved world peace. When his subordinates urged him to order an attack, Baines said what became the most rational statement in history: "Two great nations should not go to war over a pig." Baines' decision showed true military wisdom. He realized that no matter how important the San Juan Islands dispute was, it wasn't worth starting a war that could kill thousands. This kind of rationality was especially precious given the tense situation. Meanwhile, the US government in Washington also realized how serious things had gotten. Army General in Chief Winfield Scott was urgently dispatched to handle the crisis. Scott was an experienced diplomat and military man who understood how to diffuse conflicts without losing face. When Scott arrived at San Juan Island, he immediately met with Admiral Baines. These two seasoned military men quickly reached a temporary agreement. Both sides would maintain a small military presence on the island, but avoid any actions that could trigger conflict. This was like two adults finally deciding to solve problems rationally, instead of fighting like children. This agreement was called the Joint Occupation Agreement, stipulating that the US and Britain would each station 1 company of soldiers on the island until the border dispute was finally resolved. This arrangement wasn't perfect, but at least it prevented war. Most ironically, the cause of the entire crisis, that poor pig, had long been forgotten. Cutler eventually paid Griffin some compensation, but nobody cared about the exact amount anymore. One pig's death nearly caused a world war, but ultimately only resulted in a few dollars in compensation. From 1859 to 1871, American and British forces conducted history's most peculiar joint occupation on San Juan Island. These 12 years of military standoff were possibly the most peaceful and friendly military conflict in human history. U.S. forces established American camp at the island's south end, while British forces built English camp at the north end. The two camps were far enough apart to avoid daily friction, but close enough for soldiers to have friendly exchanges. This was like two roommates maintaining polite distance in the same apartment. More interestingly, soldiers from both sides quickly became friends. They regularly visited each other, drank together, and even held joint sporting events. American soldiers taught British soldiers baseball, while British soldiers taught Americans soccer. This friendship made you wonder if they even remembered they were on a military mission. Every Independence Day and the Queen's birthday, both armies would invite each other to celebration. Imagine American soldiers on the 4th of July inviting British soldiers to celebrate American independence, while British soldiers on the Queen's birthday invited Americans to toast the British Queen. The absurdity of these scenes was indescribable. Civilian life on the island was also interesting. American and British settlers learned to coexist peacefully and often helped each other. They faced harsh weather, disease, and other challenges together, gradually forgetting national differences. This proved that ordinary people find peaceful coexistence easier than governments do. During these 12 years, the only casualties were one accidentally dead pig, not the crisis causing one, and some soldiers hospitalized for excessive drinking. This was probably the lowest casualty rate of any military conflict in human history, even lower than peacetime accidents. By 1871, both American and British governments finally decided to resolve this 12-year border dispute through international arbitration. They chose German Kaiser Wilhelm I as arbitrator, which was interesting in itself. Having a German settle an Anglo-American dispute, Wilhelm I faced no simple task. He needed to carefully study the 1846 Oregon Treaty text, analyze geographical evidence, and make a fair judgment. This was like being asked to referee a fight between two friends, except these friends were world superpowers. On the 21st of October 1872, Wilhelm I announced his decision. The San Juan Islands belonged to the United States. His reasoning was that Haro Strait was indeed the region's main channel. So according to the 1846 treaty, the border should follow this strait. The British were disappointed by this ruling but gracefully accepted the result. No protests, no threats, no military action. They simply packed up and withdrew from San Juan Island. This dignified defeat showed true gentlemanly conduct. Americans were naturally happy, but also showed appropriate humility. No excessive celebration, no humiliating the losers. Both sides displayed the maturity expected of great nations. Most ironically, the dispute resolution process was more civilized and rational than the dispute itself. One pig's death triggered 12 years of military standoff, but it was ultimately resolved through peaceful arbitration. This contrast made the entire event seem even more absurd, although the pig war sounds ridiculous. It actually provided many important lessons for international relations. This event demonstrated how small conflicts can rapidly escalate into major crises and the importance of rationality and diplomacy. First, the pig war proved the danger of border disputes. Even the smallest territorial disagreements can trigger serious international conflicts. This lesson remains highly relevant today, with similar border disputes still existing worldwide. Second, this event showed how individual actions can affect international relations. Lyman Cutler's decision to shoot a pig nearly caused a world war. This reminds us that in sensitive areas, everyone's behavior can have enormous consequences. Third, the pig war highlighted the importance of military commanders' personal judgment. If Admiral Baines had chosen to open fire, history might have been completely different. This proved that in crisis moments, unseen commanders' wisdom and restraint matter more than force. Fourth, 12 years of peaceful coexistence proved that even under official conflict conditions, ordinary people can find ways to live peacefully. The friendship between American and British soldiers showed the good and rational side of human nature, finally. The successful peaceful resolution through international arbitration provided an important precedent for later international law development. This peaceful dispute resolution method was later widely adopted, becoming an important component of modern international relations. The pig war story remains highly relevant today. In the social media age, small incidents are more easily amplified and international conflicts escalate faster than in 1859. Imagine if the pig war happened in today's social media era. Video of Cutler shooting the pig would go viral on TikTok. Number pig war would trend on Twitter, and netizens from various countries would start keyboard wars in the comments. Media hype might make rational diplomatic mediation even harder for governments. Modern pig wars might be cyber attacks, trade disputes, or cultural conflicts. A seemingly insignificant event, like a movie, a tweet, or a business decision, could trigger an international crisis. But the pig war also provides insights for resolving modern conflicts. Admiral Bain's rationality, General Scott's diplomatic skills, and Kaiser Wilhelm I's fair arbitration are all valuable experiences for handling modern international disputes. Most importantly, the pig war reminds us to maintain humor and rationality. When facing seemingly serious international conflicts, maybe we should ask ourselves, is this really worth going to war over? Often, the answer might be no. This is Wacky History. We dig up stories that seem ridiculous, but actually deeply reflect human nature and international relations. Remember, history isn't just stories from the past. It is the key to understanding the present and avoiding repeating mistakes. See you next time as we continue exploring the wacky history that makes you rethink the world.